Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit confused about whether we're supposed to start or not. So we're starting. So thank you and hi, everyone. I hope that wherever you are in the world, that you are all safe and well. I'm really so delighted to be joined today by Sir Ronald Cohen. I'm a huge fan of his. So it was a real honour to be asked to be part of this session and one that I couldn't pass up, even though I'm really dashing in and then dashing out again, unfortunately. I know that he is well known to most, if not all of you, but by way of introduction, Sir Ronald is chairman of the Global Steering Committee for Impact Investment and the Portland Trust. He is a co-founding director of Social Finance UK, USA and Israel, and a co-founding chair of Bridges Funds Management and also a Big Society Capital. He's been a pioneer of the impact space. And I think if we cast our mind back, not really that long ago, the main way in which the concept of impact was associated with finance was in the context of environmental and social risk management in the form of impact assessments intended to identify negative environmental and social impacts and help avoid, mitigate, or compensate them. Then impact and finance became associated in a new way with the emergence of impact investing and a community of investors and venture capitalists wishing to steer capital to serve social and environmental good. Sir Ronald Cohen has been at the heart of this movement. He chaired the Social Impact Investment Task Force that was established under the UK presidency for the G8 in 2013 to 2015. He's also worked on the Social Impact Investment Task Force and the Commission on Unclaimed Assets. So now, at the turn of a new decade, impact has really become a buzzword in the world of sustainable finance, and it's spanning well beyond that community that was really the impact community in the early days to gradually encompass mainstream financial institutions. So there are a myriad of announcements coming out every day. There's new products, there's events and initiatives that are really aspiring and making claims to drive positive impact. UNEP, and PRI have been forerunners of this trend with the release of the Principles for Positive Impact Finance in 2017, the embedding of impact analysis and management in its Principles for Responsible Banking in 2019, and this year the release of unique methodology for holistic impact analysis, which it's piloting with its members. UNEP and PRI are also launching the Legal Framework for Impact project, which uses a legal argument to contribute to building normative expectations for sustainability impact management in investment practice. So it's really exciting, I think. It hasn't been more of an exciting time to work in the world of sustainability. I think that COVID-19 has only accelerated people's understanding, really, of all of the interconnectedness of issues in the world, the importance of healthy people and a healthy planet, and that they really have to underpin a healthy economy. So, Ronald, so thank you so much for giving us your time today. I want to start by talking about the book that you've recently authored that's called Impact, Reshaping Capitalism to Drive Real Change. And do you really believe, like me, that there is a revolution, that it's indeed underway? And if you do, what does that mean? What's your view of what's going on in the world now and why this is all happening? Why is it all suddenly coming together?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiona. It's wonderful to share the platform with you to talk about a subject that's very close to both our hearts. And in impact, yes, I do compare the impact revolution to the tech revolution and say that it will be as widespread and as disruptive as the tech revolution has been. And what the impact revolution involves is basically shifting our economies to make decisions on the basis not just of risk return, as has been the practice for a couple of centuries now, but on the basis of risk, return, and measurable impact. And the big breakthrough is that we can, in the 21st century, measure the impact of a company. We can measure its operational impact, we can measure its product impact, and we can measure its employment impact. And we have the ability to monetize it. We can express it in monetary terms, and we can reflect it through a company's financial accounts. This breakthrough has come as a result of a couple of decades worth or more of effort on the part of a large number of bodies in the measurement space, SASB and GRI being notable among them. At Harvard Business School, where I'm privileged to chair the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative, about 5 weeks ago, we published the environmental impact of 1,800 companies in monetary terms. And when you look at these companies, Fiona, you see things that you and I have been unable to see over the past decade, as we've talked about this. You see that 15% of those companies, 250 of them, actually create more environmental damage in dollar terms than they deliver in profit. You see that a full third of these companies, 600 companies or so, deliver environmental damage that's equivalent to 25% of their profit. And today we have published, and you can all find it on the Harvard Business School Impact Weighted Accounts site, a paper on how we measure the employment impact of companies, how we value the lack of diversity that they have. We give the example of Intel, whose employment impact of $7 billion in wages is reduced by half because of lack of diversity, equality of pay, gender equality, and so on and so forth. And shortly we will be publishing the accounts of companies showing their product impact as well. So the big breakthrough, Fiona, is that technology enables us now to measure the impact of a company and to put it alongside profit in measuring its performance. And today is a bit of a historic day, actually, because in the papers today, in the Financial Times of this morning, you will see a headline, Rebellion of Shareholders at Procter & Gamble Meeting, where 2/3 of shareholders voted that Procter & Gamble, one of the largest companies in the world, I think number 42 in the Fortune 500, a company with $65 billion worth of sales, must do more to disclose the harm that it creates through deforestation and do something about it. Now, if you go to the Harvard Business School data site, you will see that P&G, as it's known, creates $1.7 billion of operational environmental damage a year without counting the deforestation cost. Now that's equivalent to 10% of its profit, that 1.7. By the time you've added the deforestation cost, which if it makes this information public, we will be very, it'll be very easy to calculate, and we'll be very happy to publish, that number will be even greater. So what started off, as you were saying, was concern around measuring environmental damage. What turned into impact investment, where you seek profit and to measure your environmental and social impact, has led us today to understand that we need impact economies where investors and companies make their decisions on the basis of risk, return, and impact, so that they can bring solutions to the huge social, the economic and wealth inequality challenges that we face, the Black Lives Matter events that we've seen, the revolts in France, in Chile, in the Lebanon against social and economic inequality, as well as the environmental challenges we face. And I suppose, Fiona, you could say that every few decades or sometimes centuries, our economic systems change. And we've seen a progression of economic systems, and this is, in my view, the new frontier for capitalism and for society.
I completely agree. It does feel like sometimes that people think that it was invented yesterday, and it has actually taken us really a long time to get here. But it's really exciting to see what's happening. I mentioned in the beginning about COVID-19 because I do really think that, or I hope that it is something that certainly is going to accelerate the whole issue of sustainability even further. Within our signatory base, I've actually, even though our signatories are engaged in these issues, I have never seen them so engaged than they are at the moment. And particularly, engagement has been very high over the last 5 years on the climate issues around environmental issues, but I've never seen them, our signatories, so engaged around social issues, whether that's been about human capital management and how companies have been dealing with their employees in the pandemic, whether it's been around supply chains and the expectations that institutional investors have had of companies to be making sure that suppliers are being paid, that employees down supply chains are being looked at, whether it's been about human rights, labour rights more generally. Do you think that this will be that final sort of push that we need? What's your view around COVID?
I do, Fiona, and I feel we're at a historic crossroad after the COVID 19 crisis, similar to the crossroad that our predecessors were at in 1929 after the Great Crash. Let me explain why. After the Great Crash, investors sat up and realized that they had been investing in companies without proper transparency on the profits they made. Because, strange as though it may sound today, these companies could pick their own accounting principles and there were no auditors to verify their numbers. And in 1933, just 4 years after the Great Crash, the United States led the world in mandating generally accepted accounting principles and the use of auditors. Now, there were plenty of people at the time who said that this would be impossible to achieve. How could you have a single set of accounting principles for every company, irrespective of size or sector? And that it would spell the end of American capitalism as that generation knew it. Well, today we're at a similar crossroad with regard to impact transparency. You have $100 trillion that have signed up to the principles for responsible investment, of responsible investment. You have more than $30 trillion of environmental, social, and governance investment in the world today. And impact investment, which at the time of the G8 task force that you referred to, when we wrote the report, we had a title of one of the chapters, The First to Trillion. That was just 6 years ago, Fiona,
Yeah.
and we're going to hit the trillion this year. So we have more than a third of professionally managed assets today going to achieve risk, return, and impact. And yet we have no transparency on impact. And so I think COVID, which has shaken our beliefs and our habits very significantly, has led us to think about new forms of capitalism, new forms of government. I think COVID will accelerate now the shift to impact economies.
What do you think? You talked about, and you've been an ardent defender and talking about impact accountability, if you, as you mentioned, and there's been a lot happening around disclosure standards, whether that's GRI, SASB, etc. And there's been a lot more. There's been a lot happening in this space. So, What do you think, though, are the final barriers that need to come down, need to be addressed if we're really going to complete this revolution that's happening in capitalism?
So, Fiona, the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative is a joint effort of the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment, which I chair, which operates across 33 countries today, and the Impact Management Project, of which you are also a member. And Clara Barbie, who spoke earlier today, is the vice chair of the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative. George Serafim, a professor of accounting, is the CEO, and I am the chair. I think now that we can see, building on the work that has been done by more than 150 different organizations that have been wanting to measure different aspects of impact, now that we can see that we can actually measure, value, and reflect through financial accounts the impact performance of companies, we need governments to mandate, as they did in 1933, that every company, starting 3 years from now, has to publish impact-weighted financial accounts. And if governments do that, Fiona, we will begin to see companies which have already started to move down the path, like the declaration of the Business Roundtable a year ago, down the path of saying we've shifted from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. We will begin to provide the tools for companies to actually walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. So we need governments now to mandate, as the US government did in 33 and every government in the world has done since then, that companies must provide impact transparency through their financial accounts.
Okay, so that's governments and what they should be mandating. And we've talked about the growth of responsible investment. If I think back to the PRI, when the PRI was launched in 2006, so really not that long ago, there were 86 signatories. And now today, as we were talking about, over 100 trillion in assets under management. We've got over 3,100 signatories. A lot of that growth's come in the last 5 years, but a lot of it's come in the last 2 years. And we predict that we will accelerate growth in the next few years. So, what do you think? Now, when I talk about those figures, I also like to clarify that people are at different stages of where they're at with responsible investment, and you've got people coming from very different regulatory environments, and you've got small pension funds, very large ones, very sophisticated. So I'm not saying I'm not trying to pretend everyone's at the same stage. But what do you think that the role of mainstream investors and financial institutions that are gathered here today for the UNEP Global Roundtable and are thinking about these issues, what do you think their role today should be about driving impact as opposed to maybe what it was 10 years ago?
So let me put this impact revolution in perspective for all of our viewers. It started with consumers beginning to change their consumption preferences, refusing to buy the products of certain companies. Employees refusing to work for certain companies, which were polluting the environment or creating social issues. Investors then became aware of it and began to realize that this had significant implications for the value of the companies they had in their portfolios. And many investors were also influenced by the change in values into thinking that their money should actually do good and do well at the same time. As we've gathered experience of investing through risk-return impact rather than just risk-return, we've come to realize that risk-return impact delivers better financial returns than risk-return. Why? Because you reduce the risks involved, the risk of regulation, taxation, talent leaving you, consumers leaving you, investors deserting you. And you can see that risk expressed through market valuations today, by the way, in the Harvard data set. You can see a correlation, Fiona, within sectors between companies that pollute more or create more environmental damage being worth less than their competitors. So the weight of ESG money has already shifted the scales in favor of companies that are creating less environmental damage. And companies like Tesla that are actually trying to improve our environment significantly by weaning us off the combustion engine have come to be worth more than their biggest competitors like General Motors. So the risk side is very important, but the opportunity side is equally important. You begin to discover when you look at investment decisions, whether you're a business or an investor, with an impact lens on, you begin to discover new markets and you begin to discover new avenues for growth and profit. And I can give you just one example of a venture which designed a pair of spectacles for the blind, which whispers into the ear of the wearer the page of the book they're holding or the value of the banknote in their hand. And set up by a fantastic team of Israeli entrepreneurs who sell their company out for $15 billion, a previous company, to Intel. Now, here is an impact venture that is designed to help 35 million blind people in the world and 250 million visually impaired people to lead better lives. But if you look at it through an impact lens, you ask the question, how can this technology help the maximum numbers of people in the world? And you get a surprising answer, which is, what if you gave those spectacles to the 800 million illiterate adults in the world? What would that do for their lives and for their livelihoods, for their economies and even for the world economy? So for both those reasons, risk improvement and profit improvement, risk return impact will deliver better returns than just risk return. So investors today have to see this as a mega trend. It's like the measurement of risk coming in, which changed all our portfolios from holding just two securities, the stocks of the national government of the investor and the bonds the stocks of the National Stock Exchange of that investor or the bonds of that government, to the multi-asset portfolios that we have today. Then we had technology that came along and disrupted the models of companies, changing our portfolios. And now we have impact coming, which is going to do the same thing as technology and risk before it. It's going to change the shape of all our portfolios. And those who refuse to accept that impact is going to disrupt business models are going to be left behind, like those who refuse to accept that small companies with new technologies could disrupt huge markets and overtake leading competitors. So investors today should be investing all their assets in ESG and impact investment. Impact investment measures the return. And when we add impact weighted accounting to ESG, that 30 trillion or more becomes impact investment. And that can help us to build a fairer and more sustainable world, Fiona.
So I can see, Sir Ronald, that our clock has just run out. So I had so many more questions to ask you, and I wish we had so much longer. But thank you so much for your time today, for your pioneering work, really, for your continued commitment. But you are really, I look at you always as a true inspiration to keep going on the work that we're doing. So thank you so much for everything that you do and for being with us today.
And for everything that you do, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you.